Good morning, Econ students. Hope you had a good Tuesday. Now we're on to Wednesday, Review FRQ number 9. And one of the reasons I picked this one is simply because good review with the multiplier. Like I said, one of the things you should be doing this week as you get ready is getting a formula page. Some kind of reference sheet that you can refer to and easily use on the AP exam. So, without further ado, let's talk about this one. Assume the economy is operating at full employment output and the government has a balanced budget. More on that later. A drop in consumer confidence reduces consumption spending, causing the economy to enter a recession. And for once, this one, we're not starting out with the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. The first question has to do with how would this affect the Phillips curve. So, part A, explain the effect of the decrease in consumption spending on the short run Phillips curve. So here we have happy short run Phillips curve. I have 5% kind of as our natural rate of unemployment or full employment output rate. So 5%, let's say inflation rate's 4%. Okay, so we start right there at point A. A drop in consumer spending. So let's keep in mind with consumer spending, that affects aggregate demand, C plus I plus G plus X. And when we talk about aggregate demand, we're talking about movement on the Phillips curve. If it's aggregate supply, the whole Phillips curve moves. So consumer spending decreases, aggregate demand decreases. If aggregate demand decreases, that moves us toward unemployment. Okay, so your answer should have something to do with moving to the right on the Phillips curve. So, like I said, you don't have to draw, but we'll demonstrate here. Let's say it goes up to 8% unemployment and 2% inflation. So movement, an increase in unemployment on the Phillips curve, movement toward unemployment on the Phillips curve should look something like that. You don't have to draw it, but for me, visuals always help. Now here's the math part. Okay, so we're going to deal with a couple different multipliers here, both the spending multiplier and the tax multiplier. Assume the real GDP falls short of full employment output. So this is our recessionary gap. It's basically $500. I suppose I should say $500 billion, but instead there. And the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. See part 1. Calculate the minimum increase in government spending that could bring about full employment. So first, spending multiplier. Spending multiplier, remember, is 1 over 1 minus MPC. So 1 over 1 minus MPC is the spending multiplier. Remember, MPC, if they throw MPS at you in any way, shape, or form, remember, MPC plus MPS always equals 1. Okay, because you get that extra dollar. You can either save it, spend it, save some of it, spend some of it, so on and so forth. But it always equals 1. So, in this case, 1 over 1 minus 0.8. Like so, MPC is 0.8. 1 over 0.2. And you can use your calculators. If this is too complicated, 1 over 0.2 is 5. So our spending multiplier is 5. Now, they didn't tell us how much government spending needed to change. They told us, that we needed to get $500 in extra income to get back to full employment output. So, where the formula is change in GDP is equal to the multiplier times change in government spending. Okay, so when we have the spending multiplier, it's going to look like that if we're calculating total change in GDP. So we know the change in GDP is 500. We know the multiplier is 5. Looks like that. Do some quick math. 500 divided by 5, and our change in government spending should be 100. So to get back to full employment output, we would need to increase government spending by 100. Okay, so here is a more complicated part of the question that we have to use the tax multiplier. Assume that instead of increasing government spending, that the government decides to reduce personal income taxes. You need to know that the tax multiplier is different. Will the reduction in personal income taxes required to achieve full employment be larger than or smaller than the government spending change? So we know we had to change government spending by 100. How much do we need to change taxes by? Well, first, remember the tax multiplier is different. So you should have this formula written down somewhere. MPC over 1 minus MPC is the tax multiplier. So in this case, 0.8 over 1 minus 0.8, 0.8 over 0.2, like so. So the tax multiplier is going to be 4. So right away, you don't have to, I'm going to finish the rest of this problem, but notice that the tax multiplier is smaller, and a lot of this has to do with how we treat extra income based on tax cuts or less income based on tax increases. You know, the idea that perhaps we save more of it, the idea that we don't inject it directly into the economy the way we would government spending and transfer payments and things like that. But that's more of a philosophical difference in question, and you don't need to worry about that. Just need to remember our formulas. Okay, so if you know the tax multiplier is smaller, you can probably guess that the tax decrease has to be bigger, but let's do the math anyway. Tax multiplier, again, change in GDP is equal to the tax multiplier times change in taxes. So same basic idea, except we're using taxes and tax multiplier instead of the spending multiplier and the change in government spending. We know we need the GDP to go up by 500. We know the tax multiplier is 4. So it looks like that. And when you do the math, the change in taxes, 500 divided by 4, change in taxes has to be 125. So there you go. The change in taxes, or the tax cut, has to be bigger than the change in government spending in order to achieve the same result. That's for answer part C. Explain the impact of increased government spending on real interest rate in the economy. And those of you who did this FRQ yesterday, real proud. I think emphasis on, okay, every time we're dealing with the real interest rate, we're talking about the loanable funds market. So we'll draw that really quick. And again, we're talking, I just realized I skipped a question. I'll go back to that. So excited about the multiplier that I forgot part B. Since we're talking about government when we use expansionary fiscal policy, typically that means the government has to borrow money because if we cut taxes, they're taking in less revenue, or we increase spending. And if they increase spending, that means, well, in a lot of cases, it's our government. We're spending money that we don't have. So demand for loanable funds increases. Again, part D, if demand for loanable funds increases, that means real interest rates go up. And if real interest rates go up, how does this affect economic growth? Part E, if real interest rates go up, economic growth is hurt. Okay, high interest rates means businesses borrow less, businesses don't spend as much on capital equipment and machinery and factories and things like that, which in the long run means less stuff. Okay, remember that idea that in the short run, a lack of interest, in the short run, high interest rates hurt investment. Interest rates go up, investment goes down. If investment goes down, aggregate demand goes down. That's the short run impact. But in the long run, less investment means less stuff. Okay, less stuff being produced. That hurts economic growth. Going all the way back to part B. Sorry, I mixed these up a little bit. What is the impact of a recession on the federal budget? This is a question that has to do with deficits and surpluses. So with our budget, we can either have a balanced budget, meaning spending equals revenue in our dreams, or we can have a deficit, meaning spending is greater than revenue. We're spending more than we take in. Okay, or we can have a surplus, another fantasy of ours, okay, where the government is actually spending less than it takes in revenue. Okay, so in this case, we're talking about a recession in the federal budget. If you have high rates of unemployment, typically you're going to increase transfer payments, things like Medicaid, welfare. Okay, those things are going to go up. Or if you look at right now, unemployment insurance. Okay, a lot more people are unemployed. That means a lot more people are applying for unemployment insurance. That represents an outlay that the government has to make to keep people alive. That's a huge increase in spending. And you have increases in spending like that. Add to the fact that when people are making less money, if they're unemployed, they're not going to be paying as much in taxes. Okay, so you have it moves toward a deficit. You have a federal budget deficit in cases like that. That's one of those things when it often gets politicized when we talk about, the federal budget deficit and the national debt. That's really kind of beyond the control of presidents. A lot of people were very critical of President Obama for increasing the deficit, or President Trump recently for increasing the deficit. But in both cases, we're talking about huge increases in government spending, mainly because the economy isn't doing well, and trying to keep people afloat. And these are things known as automatic stabilizers, unemployment insurance, federal outlays for social programs to keep people alive. These kind of automatically happen without the president's necessarily changing, Congress necessarily changing any policy. It's just natural. When we have a recession, we're going to be collecting less in tax revenue and spending more on social programs and transfer payments and things like that. And this has been true really ever since we invented our social safety net way back in the 1930s. Okay, so it's not really fair. It's just one of those natural things that happen unless we're willing to cut government spending on social programs that people need when there's high levels of unemployment. We're probably always going to produce federal budget deficits when we're in a recession. Okay, and maybe the emphasis should be when our economy is doing well, perhaps maybe not raising taxes, but saving some of the money, that we don't need to use on social programs when the economy is doing well, and using that to develop a budget surplus. But that's talk for another time. FRQ number 10 coming your way. I'm also going to be posting. College Board has some practice FRQs to walk you through on the YouTube channel that they've been working on. So hopefully you take a look at those. It's going to go in order: Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4, Unit 5. Posted that on Teams. Have a great Wednesday. See you tomorrow.